Maya Chen had been invisible for so long that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. At 19 years old, she'd spent the last 8 months living in the forgotten corners of Portland, making her home in the spaces nobody else wanted. The old transit tunnels beneath 3rd Avenue had become her sanctuary, a place where the city's noise faded into echoes and she could finally breathe without someone telling her to move along. She hadn't always been this way. There were fragments of another life tucked away in her memory, like photographs kept in a drawer you're afraid to open. A mother who smiled and made pancakes on Sunday mornings. A small apartment that always smelled like jasmine tea. But that was before the accident. Before the system swallowed her whole. Before she became just another case number bouncing between foster homes that never quite felt like home. When she aged out at 18, there was no safety net waiting to catch her. Just a garbage bag of belongings, a bus pass, and the kind of freedom that feels more like abandonment. She'd really tried to make it work. There was the retail job that disappeared when the store closed, the shared apartment she couldn't afford after her roommate left, the shelter that was always full by the time she arrived. One setback led to another, and before she knew it, she was sleeping on benches and washing up in public restrooms, trying to hold on to some shred of dignity while the world looked right through her. The shopkeepers in the historic district had given her the nickname Street Rat. She'd overheard it one morning outside the bakery on Morrison Street, when she'd been sitting on the sidewalk trying to warm herself in the early sun. The owner had come out with his broom, making sweeping gestures like she was trash to be cleared away. "Go on, Street Rat," he'd muttered, loud enough for his customers to hear. "You're bad for business." Maya had learned not to let the word sting anymore. She'd built walls around herself thick and high because caring hurt too much, but some part of her buried deep still noticed everything. It was a skill she'd developed over years of instability, a survival mechanism that had served her well. In foster homes, you learned to read moods and anticipate problems. On the streets, you learned to spot danger before it spotted you. Maya's mind had become a catalog of patterns and details, filing away information that might mean the difference between safety and trouble. She spent her days moving through the city like a ghost, collecting discarded newspapers from recycling bins and reading them cover to cover in her tunnel hideaway. It was her connection to a world that had disconnected from her. She read about city council meetings and restaurant openings, about kids winning spelling bees and couples celebrating 50th anniversaries. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like to have a life ordinary enough to end up in the community news section. It was a Tuesday in late September when Maya first read about Mrs. Kowalski. The story was buried on page 7 of the Metro section. Just a few paragraphs about a burglary in the Hawthorne district. An elderly woman living alone had come home from her weekly card game to find her back door forced open and her home ransacked. The article mentioned that while electronics and cash had been left behind, family photographs and heirlooms were taken, items with sentimental value but little worth to anyone else. Maya read the article twice, something about it nagging at her mind. She'd walked past Mrs. Kowalski's street countless times. It was one of those neighborhoods where people still knew their neighbors' names, where gardens were tended with care and porch lights glowed warm in the evenings. The kind of place Maya used to dream about when she was younger, before she learned that dreams were dangerous things to hold on to. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more burglaries made the news. Mr. Tanaka, who ran the corner grocery until he retired. Mrs. Chen, no relation to Maya despite sharing her last name, a widow who volunteered at the library. Mr. Rodriguez, a veteran who always wore his service pin on his jacket. All elderly, all living alone, all targeted for items that carried memories rather than monetary value. The police quotes in the article sounded frustrated but routine. They were investigating, following leads, asking anyone with information to come forward. Maya could read between the lines. They had nothing. These weren't the kind of crimes that got priority attention. No one had been hurt. The stolen items weren't worth enough to justify extensive resources. The victims were old and alone, easy targets in a city with bigger problems to solve. But Maya couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe it was because she understood what it meant to have nothing. When you've lost everything, the few things you manage to hold on to become sacred. Those photographs, those heirlooms, they weren't just objects. They were proof that these people had mattered to someone, that they'd had lives full of love and connection. Having those stolen must have felt like losing pieces of themselves. She started paying closer attention as she moved through the city. Maya had routes she followed, patterns that kept her safe and helped her find the resources she needed. The soup kitchen on Burnside at noon, the library on 10th where she could use the bathroom and no one bothered her if she sat quietly, the church on Yam Hill that sometimes left bags of day-old bread by the back door. In between, she walked, covering miles each day through neighborhoods most people only saw from their car windows. It was during these walks that Maya first noticed the white utility van. It was parked on Belmont near one of the coffee shops that had opened in the last year, the kind with exposed brick and prices that made Maya's stomach hurt. The van was clean, professional-looking, with a logo on the side that read Portland Water Services in blue letters. A man in coveralls was consulting a clipboard, looking official and forgettable in the way that service workers often are. Maya wouldn't have given it a second thought except that 3 days later, she saw the same van parked 2 blocks from Mr. Rodriguez's house. This was the day after his burglary had been reported in the paper. The coincidence made something click in her mind, that instinct she'd learned to trust. She stopped at a distance, pretending to sort through a recycling bin while she watched. The driver was alone, which struck her as odd. The real city water workers she'd seen always traveled in pairs. There was something else, too. Something her observant eye caught that most people would miss. The logo on the van wasn't quite right. The shade of blue was slightly off and the font didn't match the official city vehicles she'd seen around town. It was close enough to pass at a glance, but Maya had spent months studying details, and details were her language now. She watched as the man knocked on a door, waited, then made notes on his clipboard before returning to his van and driving away. Maya memorized the license plate without thinking about it, her mind cataloging the information the way other people might save a phone number. Washington plates. 7834. White Chevy cargo van, maybe 5 years old. Small dent in the rear bumper on the driver's side. That night in her tunnel, Maya sat with her collected newspapers spread around her like pieces of a puzzle. She traced the timeline of the burglaries with her finger, marking addresses in her mind. Then she thought about where she'd seen the van. The locations were close to the crime scenes, but always before the burglaries occurred, never after. He was scouting, she realized. Choosing his targets, planning. Maya knew she should tell someone. But who would listen to a homeless girl with no phone, no address, no credibility? She'd tried talking to police before, once when she'd witnessed a car break-in. Another time when she'd seen someone following a woman late at night. Both times she'd been dismissed, treated like she was the problem rather than someone trying to help. The officers had looked at her dirty clothes and the backpack that held everything she owned, and she could see the judgment in their eyes. Street rat, unreliable, probably on drugs or mentally ill. Move along. So Maya decided to do what she did best. Watch. Wait. Notice the things that others missed. She expanded her daily routes to cover the neighborhoods where the burglaries had occurred, looking for patterns. She spent hours in the library, using the computers to search for information about water department procedures and city service schedules. She learned that real water meter readers always wore photo ID badges, always worked in teams, always drove trucks with current registration tags displayed in the windshield. The white van had none of these things. For someone society had labeled invisible, Maya was discovering she had a kind of power. She could move through spaces without being noticed. She could observe without being observed. The very thing that made her vulnerable, her invisibility, also made her the perfect witness. People didn't guard their behavior around her because they didn't see her as someone who mattered. 3 weeks after reading about Mrs. Kowalski, Maya spotted the white van again. This time it was parked in the Pearl District, on a quiet residential street lined with restored Victorians. Her heart started beating faster as she watched the driver knock on another door. An elderly Asian woman answered, clearly surprised by the visit. Maya couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see the man showing some kind of identification, gesturing toward the side of the house where the water meter would be located. The woman nodded, looking a little confused but trusting, the way people from a different generation often did when someone in a uniform showed up with an official explanation. Maya knew, with a certainty that settled in her bones, that this woman would be next. The question was what she could do about it. She'd spent so long being powerless, being someone things happened to, rather than someone who could make things happen. The familiar weight of helplessness pressed down on her shoulders. But then she thought about Mrs. Kowalski coming home to find her memories stolen. She thought about Mr. Tanaka and Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez, all of them alone, all of them vulnerable in the same way Maya was vulnerable. Nobody was protecting them. Nobody was paying attention. Maybe it was time for the invisible girl to make herself seen, even if it scared her, even if no one listened, because staying silent, staying safe, staying small had never protected her before, and maybe, just maybe, being invisible had taught her how to see the truth that everyone else was missing. The white van pulled away from the curb, and Maya made a decision. She would follow it. She would document everything she saw, and somehow, some way, she would find someone who would listen. The morning after Maya decided to follow the white van, she woke before dawn in her tunnel hideaway, her mind already racing with plans. The concrete floor had left her back aching, and the autumn chill had seeped into her bones despite the sleeping bag she'd found behind a camping store. But discomfort was an old companion, easier to ignore than the nervous energy thrumming through her veins. She had a purpose now. It felt strange, almost foreign after months of just surviving day to day. When you're homeless, your world shrinks to immediate needs. Where will I sleep tonight? Where can I get food? Is it safe here? But tracking the van had awakened something in Maya that had been dormant for a long time. A sense that she could matter, that what she noticed could make a difference. Over the next week, Maya became a shadow. She'd learned the patterns of the city, knew which streets had good sightlines and which alleys provided quick escapes. She started spending more time in the neighborhoods where the burglaries had occurred, watching for the white van. Her days became a careful choreography of observation, moving through spaces where homeless people were tolerated or simply overlooked. The library became her research headquarters. Maya had always been smart, something her teachers used to tell her before foster care disrupted her education. She'd missed years of formal schooling, moved from district to district, but she'd kept reading, kept learning on her own. Now she used the library computers to study everything she could find about the burglaries, about con artists who targeted the elderly, about how these crimes typically worked. What she discovered made her stomach turn. Elder fraud was everywhere, but it was underreported because victims often felt ashamed or didn't realize they'd been targeted until it was too late. The criminals were patient, methodical. They built trust, gathered information, then struck when their victims were most vulnerable. And because the stolen items often had sentimental rather than monetary value, insurance companies didn't care, and police departments didn't prioritize the cases. Maya also learned about herself during those hours in the library. She'd grown up thinking she wasn't smart enough, wasn't focused enough, because that's what moving between schools and homes had taught her. But now, following threads of information across websites and databases, she realized she had a gift for seeing connections. Her memory was exceptional. She'd just never had the chance to use it for anything that mattered. On the 5th day of her surveillance, Maya spotted the van again. She was near Laurelhurst Park, a neighborhood where old money lived in houses with wraparound porches and gardens that looked like magazine spreads. The driver was parked outside a craftsman-style home, talking to an elderly man who was using a walker. Maya positioned herself behind a hedge across the street, close enough to observe but far enough to avoid notice. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes. The driver was gesturing animatedly, playing the role of the concerned water department employee. He pointed at the meter, then at his clipboard, his body language radiating helpful efficiency. The elderly man nodded along, clearly trusting this official-looking stranger. Maya watched as the driver wrote something down, asked a few more questions, then returned to his van with a friendly wave. As the van pulled away, Maya made a split-second decision. She crossed the street and approached the house. Her heart hammered in her chest. She knew how she looked. In clothes she'd been wearing for too many days, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that couldn't quite hide that it needed washing. But she knocked anyway. The elderly man who answered looked startled to find her there. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Maya could see him taking in her appearance, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. "I'm sorry to bother you," Maya said quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. "That man who just left, the one from the water department, can I ask what he wanted?" The man's eyebrows drew together. "He was checking our meter. Said there might be a leak, needed to verify our account information." He paused. "Why? Who are you?" Maya knew she was on thin ice. "I don't think he's really from the water department. I think he might be planning to rob you." The words sounded crazy even to her own ears. The man's expression hardened. "Young lady, I don't know what kind of scheme you're running, but I'm not interested. Please leave my property. Please just listen," Maya tried. But he was already closing the door. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now," he said. And the door clicked shut with finality. Maya stood there for a moment, her face burning with shame and frustration. She'd tried to help and been treated like the criminal. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. She walked away quickly, half expecting police to show up, but they never did. The man probably thought she was trying to scam him, maybe working with the van driver in some elaborate con. Why would he believe a homeless girl over an official-looking worker with a clean uniform and a clipboard? That night, curled up in her sleeping bag, Maya let herself cry for the first time in months. She'd thought she could make a difference, but nothing had changed. She was still invisible, still powerless, still someone the world had decided didn't matter. The walls she'd built around herself had cracks now, and the hurt was seeping through. But when morning came, something had shifted. The tears had washed away some of the fear, leaving behind something harder and more determined. Maya thought about all the times people had dismissed her, ignored her, treated her like she was less than human because she didn't have a home. She thought about all the elderly people who'd been robbed, who were probably dismissed in their own way because they were old and alone and easy to ignore. She couldn't give up. Not on them and not on herself. Maya decided she needed evidence, the kind that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. She started carrying a small notebook she'd found in a trash can outside an office building. Still mostly empty except for a few pages of someone's abandoned shopping lists. She began documenting everything: dates, times, locations where she'd seen the van, descriptions of the driver, details about his interactions with potential victims. She also started taking a different approach. Instead of trying to warn potential victims directly, she followed up after seeing the van. She'd wait a few days, then return to the neighborhoods and ask around, casual questions to shopkeepers and mail carriers who knew the area. Had there been any break-ins? Were the elderly residents okay? She learned to phrase her curiosity in ways that didn't raise suspicion, to seem like just another concerned community member rather than a homeless girl with a theory. The pattern became clearer. Within a week of the van's appearance, a burglary would occur. Always elderly victims, always living alone, always the same types of items stolen. Photographs, jewelry with sentimental value, small heirlooms, things that couldn't easily be traced but represented irreplaceable memories. Maya also noticed something else that made her theory solidify. The driver never came back to neighborhoods where he'd already struck. He was systematic, working his way across the city in careful arcs, never overlapping his territory. It was smart. By the time victims realized they'd been targeted, he was long gone, and there was nothing to connect him to the crime except a vague memory of a water department worker who'd seemed perfectly legitimate. She managed to spot the van 2 more times over the next 3 weeks, once in Selwood, once in the Alphabet District. Each time she documented everything in her notebook: license plate number, time of day, exact address, description of the victim. Her hands were usually shaking as she wrote, partly from cold, partly from the weight of what she was carrying. The notebook became precious to her, almost as important as the sleeping bag and the few possessions she'd managed to keep. She kept it in a plastic bag to protect it from rain, tucked deep in her backpack where it wouldn't get damaged. Sometimes she'd take it out at night and review her notes, looking for patterns she might have missed, details that could be important. But having evidence and getting someone to look at it were 2 different things. Maya knew that going directly to the police was her only real option, but the thought terrified her. She'd had too many bad experiences with law enforcement. The officer who'd arrested her for trespassing when she'd fallen asleep in a building alcove. The one who'd confiscated her blanket because sleeping in public was against city ordinance. The one who'd looked at her with such open contempt when she'd tried to report the car break-in, like she was wasting his valuable time. Still, what choice did she have? More people were being victimized while she sat on information that could stop it. Her fear couldn't be more important than their safety. Maya spent several days working up the courage. She washed her clothes in a public restroom sink and let them dry overnight. She braided her hair neatly. She rehearsed what she would say, trying to sound coherent and credible rather than like someone having delusions. The whole time her stomach was in knots. The Portland Police Bureau's central precinct was the imposing building of concrete and glass. Maya stood across the street for almost an hour, watching people go in and out. Officers in uniform, people in business clothes who might have been detectives, ordinary citizens coming to file reports or ask questions. Everyone looked like they belonged there. Everyone except her. Finally, as afternoon shadows grew long, Maya forced herself to cross the street. The automatic doors slid open and she stepped into the fluorescent-lit lobby. A receptionist sat behind a protective glass window, her expression neutral and professional. Security cameras watched from the corners. Maya felt exposed, vulnerable, every instinct screaming at her to turn around and leave. But she thought about Mrs. Kowalski's stolen photographs, about Mr. Tanaka and Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez, about the elderly man with the walker who hadn't believed her and might wake up one morning to find his memories gone. Maya walked up to the window and said, her voice barely steady, "I need to report information about the burglaries in the historic districts. I know who's doing it." The receptionist looked up, her eyes taking in Maya's appearance with a flicker of something that might have been skepticism. "You have information about a crime?" "Yes, I've been tracking someone. I have evidence." "Take a seat," the receptionist said, picking up a phone. "Someone will be with you." Maya sat in one of the plastic chairs bolted to the floor, her backpack clutched in her lap, her notebook pressed against her chest like a shield. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. She watched people come and go. Some greeted immediately, others sent away with forms to fill out. No one made eye contact with her. After 45 minutes, Maya almost left. This was a mistake. They weren't taking her seriously. She was just another homeless person with a story wasting their time. But just as she stood to go, a woman emerged from a side door. "Are you the one with information about the burglaries?" the woman asked. She was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore plain clothes, a badge clipped to her belt. "Yes," Maya said, her voice small. "I'm Detective Sarah Morrison. Come with me." Maya followed the detective through the door and down a hallway lined with offices and interview rooms. Her heart was racing so hard she thought she might pass out. This was it, the moment where she either made a difference or got dismissed as a crazy street kid with an overactive imagination. Detective Morrison led her into a small interview room with a table and chairs. "Have a seat," she said, not unkindly. "You want some water?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. The detective left and returned with a bottle of water and a legal pad. She sat across from Maya, pen in hand, expression unreadable. "Okay," Morrison said. "Tell me what you know." And Maya, hand shaking but voice growing stronger with each word, began to tell her story. Detective Sarah Morrison had been with the Portland Police Bureau for 16 years, long enough to develop instincts about people and their stories. So when the young homeless woman sitting across from her started talking about surveillance and pattern recognition, Morrison found herself caught between skepticism and curiosity. The girl looked like she hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. Her clothes were clean but worn, her face thin, her fingernails ragged. But her eyes were sharp, focused, and when she opened her notebook, the pages were filled with neat, detailed observations. Dates, times, locations, license plate numbers. This wasn't the rambling of someone unstable or looking for attention. This was methodical. This was research. "You've been following this van for 3 weeks?" Morrison asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. She'd learned that how you asked questions mattered, especially with witnesses who might be fragile or easily spooked. "Almost 4 now," Maya said, her fingers tracing the entries in her notebook. "I first saw it on September 27th near the coffee shop on Belmont. Then again near Mr. Rodriguez's house on the 30th. That's when I started paying attention." Morrison made notes. She was familiar with the burglary cases Maya was referencing. They'd been assigned to her partner, Detective Chen, but the whole unit knew about them. Low-priority cases. Frustrating because there were no solid leads and the stolen items weren't worth enough to justify extensive investigation. It was the kind of crime that made Morrison angry because she knew how it made victims feel. But reality meant they had to focus resources on cases with better chances of resolution. "And you think this van is connected to all the burglaries?" Morrison asked. "I know it is," Maya said, then seemed to catch herself. "I mean, I can't prove it yet. But the pattern is there. He shows up pretending to be from the water department, gets inside to see the layout and what they have, gathers information about when they're home alone. Then within a week they get robbed. Why do you think he's not really from the water department? Maya launched into a detailed explanation about the logo being wrong, about legitimate workers traveling in pairs, about the lack of proper identification badges and vehicle registration displays. She'd clearly done her homework. Morrison found herself leaning forward, interested despite herself. Have you gotten close enough to get a good look at the driver? Morrison asked. Maya nodded and flipped to a page in her notebook where she'd written a physical description. White male, probably late 30s or early 40s. About 6 feet tall, medium build, brown hair cut short. He has a small scar through his left eyebrow. Clean shaven. He wears generic blue coveralls and a baseball cap with the Water Services logo. The level of detail was impressive, but Morrison had to ask the question that was bothering her. Why come to us now? Why not earlier? Maya looked down at her hands. I tried once. I tried to warn someone he was targeting. They didn't believe me. Her voice got quieter. People don't usually listen to me. I'm just... She trailed off, but Morrison could fill in the blank. Just a homeless kid. Just someone society had decided didn't matter. Morrison felt a familiar frustration rise in her chest. She'd seen it too many times. The way certain people were dismissed before they even opened their mouths. The way assumptions about worth and credibility got made based on appearance rather than substance. She'd been fighting that tendency her whole career, both in others and in herself. I'm listening now, Morrison said, meeting Maya's eyes. Tell me everything. For the next hour, Maya walked Morrison through her observations. She had entries about 6 different locations where she'd seen the van, complete with details about the potential victims, the time of day, even the weather conditions. She'd made note of which houses had alarm system signs and which didn't, which neighborhoods had active street traffic and which were quieter. She'd essentially been conducting her own investigation with no training and no resources except her own time and attention. Morrison cross-referenced Maya's locations with the burglary reports they had on file. 5 of the 6 addresses Maya had documented had already been hit. The 6th was in Laurelhurst, the house with the elderly man who dismissed Maya's warning. This one hasn't been burglarized yet, Morrison said, tapping the address. Not yet, Maya agreed, but it will be. Probably in the next few days. Morrison made a decision. She pulled out her phone and took photos of the relevant pages in Maya's notebook. Then she looked at the young woman across from her, really looked at her. There was intelligence there and determination, but also exhaustion and wariness. This kid had been through things Morrison could only guess at, and she was still trying to help people who probably looked right past her every day. Here's what I need from you, Morrison said. I need to verify some of this information through official channels. I need to check if this license plate is registered to a real city vehicle, or if it's fraudulent. I need to see if any witnesses from the previous burglaries remember seeing a water department worker beforehand. Can you give me a day to do that? Maya nodded, but Morrison could see the doubt in her eyes. The girl probably thought this was brush off, that Morrison would go back to her desk and forget all about this conversation. I want you to come back tomorrow, Morrison continued. Same time. Can you do that? I don't have a phone, Maya said quietly. If the time changes, I won't know. Then same time it is. 3 o'clock. I'll be here. Morrison paused, then pulled out her wallet and took out a $20 bill. Get yourself some food, okay? Real food, not just whatever you can find. Maya looked at the money like it might disappear if she blinked. I don't need charity. It's not charity. You've spent weeks doing unpaid surveillance work on a case that's been baffling us. Consider it a consultant fee. Maya took the money with trembling fingers, folding it carefully and putting it in her pocket. You really think there's something here? You're not just humoring me? I think, Morrison said carefully, that you've noticed something important that everyone else missed. Whether I can do anything with that information depends on what I find when I start digging. But yes, I think there's something here. After Maya left, Morrison sat in the interview room for a few minutes thinking. Then she went to find her partner. Detective James Chen was at his desk, working through paperwork with the resigned expression of someone who knew the stack would never get smaller, no matter how fast he worked. Remember those residential burglaries targeting elderly victims? Morrison said, pulling up a chair. The ones with no leads? Chen looked up. The memory thieves? Yeah, what about them? I think I just caught a break on them. Morrison filled him in on Maya's observations. watching Chen's skepticism gradually shift to interest as she laid out the details. A homeless kid tracking a fake utility worker, Chen said when she finished. That's either brilliant or crazy, maybe both, Morrison agreed. But her information checks out so far. I want to run this license plate, see what we get. And I want to pull witness statements from all the previous burglaries, see if anyone mentioned a water department visit beforehand. You think this is real? I think this girl has been living on the streets with nothing to do but observe. And she's been using that time to solve a crime we couldn't crack with all our resources. Morrison pulled up the photo of Maya's notebook on her phone. Look at this documentation. It's better than some of the case files I've seen from patrol officers. Chen whistled low. Okay, let's work it. If she's right, we need to move before he hits that Laurelhurst address. Over the next 24 hours, Morrison and Chen pulled every thread Maya had given them. The license plate came back registered to a Chevy cargo van, but the owner's address was a vacant lot in Gresham. The registration had been maintained to avoid drawing attention, but it was essentially a ghost vehicle. They contacted victims from previous burglaries, asking specifically about any service worker visits in the days before the break-ins. 3 out of 5 remembered a water department employee stopping by. One had thought it was odd but hadn't reported it because nothing seemed wrong at the time. Another had only made the connection when Morrison called, suddenly remembering the friendly man with the clipboard who'd asked about their schedule and whether they lived alone. Morrison also reached out to the actual Portland Water Bureau. They had no record of meter checks or service calls at any of the addresses in question. The logo Maya had described was close to their official design but not exact. It was a classic impersonation scheme, just sophisticated enough to fool people who weren't looking closely. By the time Maya returned the next day at 3 o'clock sharp, Morrison had a file folder full of corroborating evidence. The girl looked nervous, like she expected to be told her information was useless and she should stop wasting police time. Instead, Morrison smiled. You were right, Morrison said simply. About all of it. Maya's eyes widened. Really? Really? The van is registered to a fake address. Multiple victims remember a water department visit before their burglaries. The city has no record of any legitimate service calls. You identified a pattern we missed because we were looking at each burglary in isolation, instead of seeing them as connected events. So what happens now? Maya asked. Morrison pulled out a burner phone, still in its packaging. Now we set up surveillance. That Laurelhurst address you flagged, the one that hasn't been hit yet, we're going to watch it, and I need you to help me. Me? Maya looked shocked. You know what this guy looks like. You know his vehicle, his pattern. You can move through neighborhoods without drawing attention in ways a police car can't. Morrison opened the phone package. This is for you. It's prepaid, loaded with minutes. My number is already programmed in. If you spot that van anywhere, you call me immediately. Can you do that? Maya took the phone like it was made of glass. You trust me with this? You've earned it, Morrison said. But Maya, this is important. You call me first. You don't approach him. You don't try to warn anyone. You don't put yourself in danger. You're my eyes out there, not my backup. Understood? Maya nodded, clutching the phone. Understood. Good. Because here's the thing. Morrison leaned forward. This guy is smart and he's careful. If we spook him, he'll disappear and set up somewhere else. We need to catch him in the act, with evidence that will hold up in court. That means patience and precision. Think you can handle that? For the first time since they'd met, Maya smiled. It transformed her face, making her look younger and more hopeful than Morrison had thought possible. I've got nothing but time, Detective. And I'm very good at being patient. As Maya left with her new phone, Morrison felt something she hadn't felt about these cases in months. Optimism. Sometimes the answer came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the people society overlooked were the ones who saw everything others missed. Now they just had to catch a thief before he struck again. The burner phone became Maya's most precious possession. She kept it charged using outlets at the library and the coffee shop on 3rd that didn't mind if she sat in the corner for a while as long as she bought something. The $20 from Detective Morrison had stretched further than Maya thought possible. Careful spending on food, and a pay-by-the-hour phone charging session at a tech store. For the first time in months, Maya felt like she had a purpose beyond simple survival. She still slept in the tunnels, still washed up in public restrooms, still collected cans for spare change. But now those activities were woven around something bigger. She was part of an investigation. Someone believed her. Someone was listening. Detective Morrison called her every morning at 9. A brief check-in that became the anchor of Maya's day. "Anything to report?" the detective would ask, and Maya would give her update. Negative sightings mostly, but detailed observations about the neighborhoods she'd been watching. The detective never sounded impatient or dismissive, never treated these calls like an obligation. She listened, asked good questions, and shared bits of information about the official investigation. When she could, Maya learned that Morrison and her partner Chen were coordinating with patrol units to increase presence in the neighborhoods most likely to be targeted next. They'd set up a system for processing the burglary scenes more carefully, looking for trace evidence they might have missed before. They were building a case, but they needed the suspect in the act to make it stick. 4 days after Maya got the phone, she spotted the white van again. It was early morning, that quiet time when the city was just waking up, but hadn't filled with traffic yet. Maya had been walking through the Irvington neighborhood, an area with beautiful old houses and mature trees that formed canopies over the streets. She'd been thinking about breakfast, about the church that served oatmeal on Thursday mornings. When she turned a corner, and there it was. The white van parked 3 houses down, the driver consulting his clipboard. Maya's heart jumped into her throat. She fumbled for the phone with shaking hands, nearly dropping it as she pulled up Detective Morrison's number. It rang twice before the detective answered. "Morrison, it's Maya. I see the van. I see him." Her voice came out breathless, urgent. "Where?" Morrison's tone shifted immediately to sharp focus. "Irvington, Northeast 17th and Brazy. He's parked in front of a blue house with white trim, number 2847. Stay on the line. Don't get closer. Do you understand me? Don't get closer." Maya heard Morrison shouting to someone in the background, heard the sound of movement and urgency. She pressed herself against a fence, partially hidden by an overgrown rhododendron, watching the van. The driver was getting out now, clipboard in hand, walking toward the blue house with that confident stride of someone who belonged there. "He's approaching the house," Maya reported, her voice low. "White male, blue coveralls, baseball cap. It's definitely him, Morrison. Same scar through the eyebrow. We're en route. 8 minutes. Just stay put and stay safe." Maya watched as the driver knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, her white hair neat, her posture stooped. She was wearing a cardigan despite the morning chill being relatively mild. The driver showed her something, probably fake identification, and the woman nodded. They talked for a few minutes, the driver gesturing toward the side of the house, the woman listening with the trusting expression Maya had seen before. "He's talking to an elderly woman," Maya reported. "She's letting him check the meter." "Morrison, she believes him. 6 minutes out. Stay on the line." The driver disappeared around the side of the house, the woman watching him go before retreating back inside. Maya waited, counting seconds, watching for movement. The residential street was still quiet, just a few cars passing, a jogger in bright athletic wear running by with earbuds in. Normal morning activities, everyone unaware that a crime was being planned right in front of them. The driver reappeared, made some notes on his clipboard, then returned to the front door. He knocked again, spoke briefly to the woman when she answered. Maya could see him pointing to his clipboard, probably saying something about follow-up visits or maintenance schedules. The woman nodded, thanked him, and closed the door. The driver walked back to his van, unhurried, casual. "He's done," Maya said into the phone. "He's getting back in the van. Do not follow him." "Do you hear me, Maya? Let him go. We're almost there." But the van was pulling away from the curb, and Maya felt a surge of panic. What if they lost him? What if this was their only chance? She'd been invisible for so long, good at following without being noticed. Before she could overthink it, she was moving. "Maya!" Morrison's voice was sharp in her ear. "What are you doing?" "I'm just watching which way he goes," Maya said, walking quickly but trying not to run. The van turned left at the end of the block, heading toward Broadway. Maya broke into a jog, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She reached the corner in time to see the van turn right, heading south. "He's going south on Broadway," Maya reported, breathing harder now. "Morrison, if he gets on the freeway, you'll lose him. We're 2 minutes away. Stay where you are." But Maya was already running down Broadway, keeping the white van in sight. It wasn't moving fast, wasn't trying to escape because the driver didn't know anyone was watching. He stopped at a red light 3 blocks down, and Maya put on a burst of speed, closing the distance. Her lungs burned. She wasn't used to running like this, but she couldn't lose him. The light turned green. The van proceeded through the intersection and pulled into a parking lot attached to a small strip mall. Maya watched from across the street as the driver parked and got out, stretching like someone taking a break. Then he walked into a coffee shop, the kind of local place with a chalkboard menu and mismatched furniture. Maya crossed the street and positioned herself where she could see both the van and the coffee shop entrance. She was breathing hard, her side aching from the run. The phone was still pressed to her ear. He stopped, she said. Strip mall at Broadway and Weidler. Coffee shop called The Daily Grind. He's inside. Maya, I need you to back off now. Morrison's voice was firm but not angry. You did good, but we've got this. Get somewhere safe and wait. Maya moved to a bus stop shelter across the street, sitting on the bench like someone waiting for the next bus. From here, she had a clear view of the van and the coffee shop. Her heart was still racing, adrenaline making her hands shake. She'd actually done it. She'd tracked him. She'd kept him in sight. A police car turned into the parking lot, moving slowly, casually. Then another from the opposite direction. They parked at different ends of the lot, not obviously coordinating but clearly working together. Maya recognized the careful positioning of a planned operation. An unmarked sedan pulled up to the curb near Maya's bus shelter. Detective Morrison got out of the passenger side, her partner Chen driving. Morrison walked over to Maya, her expression somewhere between impressed and annoyed. You were supposed to stay put, Morrison said. I know. I'm sorry. I couldn't let him disappear. Morrison studied her for a moment, then shook her head with what might have been the ghost of a smile. You've got good instincts. Terrible sense of self-preservation, but good instincts. She looked toward the coffee shop. Stay here with Detective Chen. Don't move. Morrison crossed the street and entered the coffee shop. Through the window, Maya could see her approach the counter, order something, acting like any other customer. She couldn't see the driver from this angle. Didn't know if Morrison had made contact or was just observing. She's going to be mad at you for a while, Chen said from the car window, keeping his eyes on the coffee shop. But between you and me, that was impressive tracking. I just didn't want to lose him, Maya said. Neither did we. You did good, kid. They waited. Maya watched the clock on a building across the street tick through 15 minutes. Her adrenaline was fading, leaving behind fatigue and the sharp awareness of her empty stomach. She'd forgotten to eat breakfast in her focus on the surveillance. Morrison emerged from the coffee shop, walking casually back to the sedan. She didn't look at Maya, just got in the car and spoke quietly to Chen. Maya couldn't hear what they were saying, but she saw Chen nod and reach for his radio. Morrison got back out and came to sit next to Maya on the bus stop bench. Our suspect is having coffee and reading the paper. Very relaxed, no indication he thinks anyone's watching him. So what now? Maya asked. Now we follow him. We see where he goes, what he does. We build the case. Morrison looked at Maya. I want you to go back to that address in Irvington, the Blue House. Talk to the woman who answered the door. Tell her you're working with the police and you need to know exactly what that man said to her. Can you do that? You want me to question her? I want you to talk to her person to person. She might be more comfortable with you than with a police officer showing up unannounced. And you're good at this, Maya. You notice details. You ask good questions. Morrison pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. This is my direct line. If she's reluctant to talk, have her call me and I'll verify you're working with us. But I think if you're honest with her, if you tell her what's happening, she'll appreciate the warning. Maya took the card, feeling the weight of the responsibility. What should I tell her? Tell her the truth. That someone is targeting elderly residents, that the man who came to her door this morning isn't really from the water department, and that she should be extra careful about security for the next few weeks. Tell her we're working to catch him, but in the meantime, she needs to be vigilant. Okay, Maya said, standing up. Her legs felt shaky, but her mind was clear. I can do that. I know you can, Morrison said. Maya, thank you. For not giving up on this, for caring enough to help people who don't even know you exist. Maya felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. When was the last time someone had thanked her for anything? When had anyone acknowledged that she was trying to make a difference? They're like me, Maya said quietly. Invisible. Easy to ignore. Someone needs to look out for them. Morrison's expression softened. You're not invisible, not to me. Now go talk to that woman before she becomes our next victim. Maya walked back to Irvington, her mind racing with what she would say. The blue house looked peaceful in the morning light, flowers blooming in window boxes, a neatly maintained yard. She stood at the sidewalk for a moment, gathering her courage. Then she walked up the path and knocked on the door. The elderly woman who answered looked startled to see her. Maya could imagine what she saw. A young girl with worn clothes and a backpack, probably assuming she was selling something or asking for donations. Mrs. Maya realized she didn't know the woman's name. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Maya. I'm working with the Portland Police Department on an investigation. The man who came to your door this morning, he wasn't really from the water department. The woman's hand went to her mouth. What? Can I come in? I need to explain something, and I think you should sit down. The woman hesitated, and Maya couldn't blame her. But something in Maya's face must have convinced her, because she stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in, then. Tell me what's going on. Maya stepped inside, and as she began to explain the burglary ring and the fake utility worker, she realized something important. She wasn't just helping with an investigation anymore. She was preventing a crime. She was protecting someone who might have become a victim. She was making a real difference, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Maya Chen felt like she mattered. The woman's name was Helen Nakamura, and she listened to Maya's explanation with growing alarm. Her living room was filled with photographs, decades of memories preserved in frames on every available surface. Pictures of children who'd grown into adults, grandchildren at various ages. A man who Maya assumed was Helen's late husband. His image repeated across the years from young soldier to gray-haired retiree. All those other people, Helen said when Maya finished explaining. They had their photographs stolen? Yes, ma'am. Along with other personal items. Things with sentimental value. Helen's eyes swept across her own collection of memories. My Walter passed 3 years ago. These pictures, they're all I have left of our life together. Her voice cracked slightly. If someone took these, that's why I'm here, Maya said gently. To make sure that doesn't happen, the police are tracking this man now. They're going to stop him. But in the meantime, you need to be extra careful. New locks, maybe a security system if you can manage it. And don't let anyone into your house unless you verify their credentials with the actual city department first. Helen studied Maya with sharp eyes that missed nothing. You're very young to be working with the police. And forgive me for noticing, but you look like you've been having a hard time. Maya felt her cheeks flush. I'm homeless, ma'am. Have been for a while. But I've been helping Detective Morrison with this case.